Dear friends, welcome to my channel. I'm Taras Berezovets. Putin made a second phone call. Yesterday, he gave an official apology. Putin's statement wasn't a true apology. He only acknowledged Russia's guilt for the incident on December 25th, when a passenger plane of Azerbaijan Airlines was shot down by Russian air defense. The president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, criticized the official Russian opposition in an Oz TV interview, mentioning absurd theories like a gas cylinder explosion, a flock of birds, and other nonsense. He merely admitted Russia's guilt for the December 25th incident, when Russian air defenses shot down an Azerbaijan Airlines passenger plane. However, after that, the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, gave a lengthy interview to the AzTV channel where he essentially tore apart the official Russian opposition without naming Putin directly or addressing him. Nonetheless, he stated that recently in Azerbaijan there have been many absurd versions circulating, including a gas cylinder explosion, a flock of birds, and other nonsense. And the facts, Aliyev said, are quite different. The Azerbaijan Airlines plane was taken down by the Russian electronic warfare system and hit by a surface-to-air missile. Russia must pay compensation. But the facts, Aliyev stated, are quite different. The Azerbaijan Airlines plane was taken down by the Russian electronic warfare system and hit by a surface-to-air missile. Russia must pay compensation. How? To the government of Azerbaijan as well as to all the victims, and also to officially acknowledge his guilt. As a result, Putin called him a second time today, obviously realizing that the pathetic nonsense he had spewed out the day before was clearly not enough. And the reason why Putin is clearly spreading such apologies to the president of Azerbaijan is obviously because Putin undoubtedly and desperately needs Azerbaijan's loyalty and absolutely needs to maintain relations with Turkey and indeed other important regional partners. And unfortunately, he can lose all this as a result of one tragic, unforeseen, and unexpected incident, I repeat, circumstances that are beyond his control, responsibility for which he does not intend to take. So today, Putin had his second phone conversation with the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev. His press secretary Dmitry Peskov told Interfax about this, but did not provide any details of this conversation. Putin's statement followed immediately after. Aliyev's interview, in which he harshly demanded that Moscow admit guilt in the crash of the Azerbaijan Airlines plane, punish those responsible and pay compensation to everyone. Well, the quotes from this interview are important enough and worth citing here, so that you understand the current background of rage that reigns in official circles in Baku and not only in Baku. The facts, Aliyev stated, are that the Azerbaijani civilian plane sustained external damage on Russian territory near the city of Grozny and practically lost control. We also know that our plane was put into an uncontrolled state by electronic warfare systems. This is the first damage inflicted on the plane. He stated that the fuselage of the Embraer 190 was riddled with holes, completely dismissing the version about a flock of birds. He also explicitly stated that a significant number of Russian officials, in an attempt to conceal the truth, tried to cover up the fact that the Russian air defense system had indeed opened fire. The fact that disappointed and surprised us? It was about the fact that Russian official structures put forward versions about an explosion of some gas cylinder. So, it clearly appeared that the Russian side wants to sweep the issue under the rug. And this, of course, brings no honor to anyone. For the first 3 days, we didn't hear anything from Russia except for ridiculous versions. He added that Russia's responsibility has been proven and paying compensation to the government of Azerbaijan as well as to all victims will not resolve the issue. He demands that those responsible be held accountable. Who are these guilty parties that forced Putin to humiliate himself? It's an obvious act of political self-humiliation, and naturally, Putin, who understands that he has been exposed and publicly shamed, feels weak and is thirsting for revenge. He wants to take the heads off those scapegoats and those responsible who, in fact, led to this tragedy and made him publicly apologize. As we know, the Russian dictator never does that. But here the situation, I repeat, is absolutely exceptional, which, as we know, the Russian dictator never does. But here the situation, I repeat, is absolutely exceptional. Obviously, he had no other conclusion. Putin understands the Azerbaijani government and the president are not going to back down. Moreover, despite the fact that many expected that Putin's first phone call and his forced admission of guilt would calm and satisfy the president of Azerbaijan, we see that this did not happen. Clearly, during this conversation, Aliyev did not hear the phrases and admissions of responsibility that he was hoping for. And that's why today he decided to bring this issue into the public sphere, which of course puts Putin in a very uncomfortable position. He has to lie and twist the truth again and once more. So he endured this humiliation twice. And yet, as we understand, President Aliyev remained dissatisfied with what the Russian dictator told him. And tomorrow perhaps we will hear a new statement, either from the president himself or from representatives of his entourage. For Putin, I repeat, it is extremely important right now to find those responsible for the tragedy and, most importantly, to designate scapegoats. He won't be able to get out of this situation, but we understand everything perfectly well. Since the incident occurred over Chechnya, nothing happens in Chechnya without the personal approval or endorsement of the Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov. Kadirov has built up enough credibility in the eyes of Putin and his enemies a long time ago. But in order to be punished and put in his place, his latest stunt, when he demanded to be given the marketplace in Alberez, supposedly because he helped the Russian authorities sort out the situation with the new representatives of the Syrian authorities, is just ridiculous. Naturally, this whole story is absolutely fake. From start to finish, it is fictitious, created solely to simply profit from the largest Russian marketplace, the value of which, even after all the scandals and criminal stories, is still estimated to be quite high, at least several $billions. And let me repeat, Kadyrov, who cynically tried to buy off Aliyev, immediately got a harsh rebuff. They told him that they didn't need any material compensation from him. Moreover, we are seeing, for the first time, this is a rare case where the gangster Kadyrov, who is used to putting many influential people in their place, has finally had to swallow his pride, excuse my expression. He hasn't responded to this yet. So, in the usual manner of Kadyrov, we're used to seeing this hot-headed tough guy who puts political leaders in their place or gives them a hard time, many of whom weigh much more than he does. But in this case, there is absolutely complete silence, despite the fact that Aliyev responded very harshly. Let me repeat that, and this was said against the backdrop of the usual style of personnel management. Let's sort everything out right now. We'll sort everything out. We'll shut everyone up. All questions are about money, and everyone will be satisfied. And those who are dissatisfied will already have problems, along criminal lines. Here we see the position of the Azerbaijani authorities is indeed very extremely harsh, and it is based primarily on Aliyev's strong confidence that he will undoubtedly and certainly be able to defend his rights, and he will be able to defend his rights not least because Turkey stands behind him, which now weighs and means even more to Putin than it did before the change of power in Syria and before the regime of Bashar al-Assad was overthrown and removed from power. Now, it is absolutely not in Putin's interest to quarrel with Turkey. She is too important to him, and that is why he is so servile. That is why he humiliates himself, and that is why Aliyev understands that he can continue to press. And this unprecedented session of Putin's self-humiliation that we are witnessing for many. Most importantly, it sends a very clear signal, including to Kadyrov, to those clans, those teeps, for whom the leader's display of weakness is absolutely unacceptable. Akela has missed this time, it looks completely obvious. And many are surprised to see how tough Putin, who is usually so hard, is trying to play this role. Gangsters who never apologize for anything. We remember how they mocked after the terrorists shot down the Malaysian Boeing and MH17 with a Russian Buki. There were no apologies, there were no explanations. There were only mockery and ridicule. The version about the Spanish dispatcher, and here unexpectedly we see a completely opposite picture. And I repeat, this is not the end of the story. I wrote about this on his Telegram channel. I believe that, in essence, I foresaw and said that any apologies from Putin will not be accepted. In Azerbaijan, they might pretend that they heard them. However, the situation is such that this story will not be completely forgotten by Putin. She definitely won't get away with it. And even now, if through incredible efforts he manages to avoid it, he will have to not only pay, not only apologize publicly, but also punish those responsible. This is the worst part. Now Putin will have to choose whether to imprison those responsible. And I think in this story, if only the ordinary officers, those who formally pressed the button, are imprisoned, the Russian air defense system that fired missiles at a civilian passenger plane, then that's it. This whole story doesn't end well for Putin. That's the whole story. Nothing good ends for Putin. I'll say it again, Kadyrov needs to be punished. And for Putin, the moment of truth has come. And he understands that on one hand he needs Aliyev, he needs the RDK. But on the other hand, he equally needs Kadyrov's loyalty. He can't punish him and he also can't not punish him. And I'll repeat, in such a dire situation, Putin, thanks to one gangster, a Chechen, thanks to the gangster Kadyrov, hasn't found himself in such a bad position for a very, very long time, which is actually the reason for all this fuss. In the last episode, I told you about Finland's actions, which boarded a ship that was carrying oil, a ship that severed the fiber optic communication at the bottom of the Baltic Sea, and how sharply the police and border service acted in Finland. Today, sources in the North Atlantic Alliance informed journalists from Iltalehti that Russia is trying to create a buffer zone in Finnish Lapland and Norwegian Finnmark in case of an attack on NATO from the east. In particular, the Russian army has already practiced such a scenario during military exercises. According to the strategic plan of the Russian command, the 14th Army Corps will carefully attack the Norwegian coast from the side of Murmansk. Moreover, the attack will be carried out from land, sea, and air, and the Russian army plans to land troops in Lapland, who will attempt a swift assault to capture the Ivalo airport. In addition, NATO also stated that the Russian army plans to send missile troops deployed in the Kola Peninsula to capture Finland. Tens of thousands will participate in the attack. The use of Russia and other units, as well as the 44th Army Corps, to attack the southern coast and southeast of Finland will also complicate the defense support for Estonia. In NATO, it is believed that Russia will try to reach the borders of 1743, which were established by the Treaty of Turku. This would mean that Russia will try to reach the shores of the Kumyoki River. Thus, the goal of the Russian 2nd and 6th armies will be the Puomalan-Salmi Strait. I apologize, it's a very complicated name. All of this, I'll repeat, is not idle speculation, it's not journalists' versions. These are official sources, which, although they don't name the publication Iltalehti, nonetheless indicate the seriousness of the situation and how seriously NATO assesses the possibility of a Russian invasion. Yes, they don't mention any timelines, that this will happen in the very near future. However, I'll repeat, the likelihood of this is assessed to be quite high. We can remember that it has always been traditional in Russian military doctrine, and this was even before World War I, that the destruction of communication systems was considered a prerequisite for subsequent invasion. In particular, back in the late 19th century, at a meeting with Tsar Nicholas II, a military operation was essentially approved to capture the Straits, the Bosporus Straits, and this operation was supposed to take place as early as 1895. It was halted at the last moment by diplomatic negotiations that got entangled in Tsarist Russia, and this operation was supposed to take place as early as 1895. She was stopped at the last moment by diplomatic negotiations that were drawn into Tsarist Russia. However, similar plans for conducting an amphibious operation in the Bosporus also existed during World War I. Officially, the operation was supposed to be commanded by the commander of the Black Sea Fleet, the then Admiral Kolchak, who is quite well known. The operation was supposed to take place in April 1917. However, you remember what happened then. The February Revolution took place. These plans were cancelled at the last moment, they were postponed, and then, of course, the October Revolution happened. And after that, all these plans were naturally buried. Nevertheless, at that time, several dozen fast-landing ships were ordered at the Mykolaiv shipyard, yes, the very same Mykolaiv shipyard in Ukraine, which was supposed to deliver the troops. A total of over 35,000 military personnel were planned to be involved in this amphibious operation. This is the real situation. And so, according to the plans of the Tsarist military command, the first step was to destroy the communications that ran along the bottom of the straits. They were supposed to be severed, destroyed, taking into account the technology. We see that 110 years later, the situation has hardly changed. Let me repeat the current situation once again. In the Baltic, where commercial ships are operating, the 5th fiber optic cable has already been severed. One can certainly reassure themselves as much as they want that this is nothing more than sabotage, while some might even think it's just a coincidence. Let me repeat, the reality looks quite threatening, which is essentially what NATO is directly stating. Another event worth noting from today is the publication in the influential American outlet The Hill, which analyzes the campaign promises of the 47th President of the United States, Donald Trump. In particular, the publication mentions that Trump made a number of promises, including regarding the swift end of the war in Ukraine and in the Middle East. However, he has now softened his rhetoric, clearly realizing that achieving these promises will not be possible, at least not quickly. The Hill reports in its publication that at the very first press conference after the election results, which took place at Mar-a-Lago in Florida, Trump stated that ending the war in Ukraine would be more difficult than the war in the Middle East. One of Trump's closest allies told reporters that he does not intend to abandon his previous promises, but is shifting from the campaign rhetoric typical of elections to more realistic approaches. These realistic approaches will primarily involve Trump reassessing the timelines for fulfilling his promises. Well, there's nothing surprising about that. Today, Russian propaganda is spreading a fake story about an alleged Ukrainian pilot named Vladimir Popovich, who supposedly surrendered in the Kursk region. This was stated by the Russian state propaganda agency TASS, citing Russian military sources. However, the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine declared that this information about the capture of a Ukrainian pilot is completely fabricated, and Ukrainian pilots continue to carry out their tasks to protect the country's airspace. Quote, enemy messages and video interrogations of Ukrainian soldiers who have been captured are part of the information war. The dissemination of such materials is used to demoralize the Ukrainian military and civilian population in order to influence public opinion both inside and outside Ukraine, the Air Force said in an official statement. At the same time, the Air Force noted that cases of military aviators being captured do occur, but not in this case. Another Russian information and psychological operation, I repeat, aimed primarily at shock. Also, a Ukrainian military project today reports in its analytical material that the Russian armed forces have begun using an unknown wheeled self-propelled artillery system, which may be a modification of the 152mm self-propelled howitzer OS-2S-43 Malva. Judging by the video published by Russian media, it is based on an armored chassis from the Bryansk automobile plant with an 8x8 wheel configuration, 8x8. Additionally, judging by the video published by Russian media, it is based on an armored chassis from the Bryansk automobile plant with an 888 wheel configuration, 8x8. In addition, it has been determined that such a model may be used in limited quantities. Essentially, judging by the video, the new self-propelled artillery system is not using a new artillery piece, but rather one based on the 2A36, mounted on a new chassis with the Hyacinth B gun that was taken out of storage. Clearly, this is due to a shortage and serious issues with the availability of the appropriate equipment in the enemy's armed forces. And finally, the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine has published information regarding the missile stocks that have been built up recently. In Russia, specifically in Gora, it was reported that Russians have stockpiled the most of the Onyx missile type, 500 units. Next are the cruise missiles of the X-101, X-55 and X-35 types. About 400 units of the Caliber cruise missile. The enemy has about 350 units. Also 130 units of Iskanders and about 50 air-launched ballistic missiles. Dagger. Furthermore, regarding the production rates of the enemy's long-range weapons, today the main intelligence directorate provides the following data. Monthly, the enemy produces between 40 to 50 Iskander missiles from 30, to 50 Caliber missiles and about 50 X-101 class missiles. These are the figures that give us a clear understanding that the enemy still has more than enough missiles to launch new strikes on Ukraine's critical and energy civilian infrastructure, which could happen in the coming days. However, we are not currently observing any signs of preparations for such an attack. Moreover, the enemy has recently reduced the intensity of shelling Ukrainian cities, which may indicate that they are trying to accumulate the necessary number of both missiles and drones for a new large-scale attack on Ukraine. That's the news we have for today, friends. Check out the latest episodes, the final episodes of this year's Real Front and Powerful programs, which are now available on my channel. There's a lot of important and valuable information there. This is the final program for 2024. Take care of yourselves, friends. Subscribe to the channel, like, share, and comment on the stream. Don't forget to recommend her videos. This video is for friends and acquaintances. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the armed forces of Ukraine. Glory to Ukrainian Special Forces, Ukrainian Territorial Defense Forces. Stay safe. You were with Major of the Ukrainian Army, Taras Berezovets. See you next time. Bye-bye.